Hello and welcome to FO Talks. My name is Cheyenne Torres, Operations Chief of Staff at Fair Observer. With me is Craig Unger, a veteran investigative journalist and New York Times bestselling author of 6 books. Today we are discussing the allegations that U.S. President Donald Trump has extensive links with Russia. Hello, Craig. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. All right. If you don't mind, we can jump right in.
Sure.
Okay. You are the author of House of Trump, House of Putin, The Untold Story of Donald Trump and the Russian Mafia. When and how did U.S. President Donald Trump's links with the Russian Mafia begin?
Well, they began certainly by 1984. And in 1984, a man named David Bogadin, who, according to FBI files, was tied to the Russian Mafia, went into Trump Tower. He put down $6 million in cash, and he said, "I'll take 5 condos." This is more than 40 years ago, so that $6 million, I believe, would be worth roughly $30 million today.
Close to it, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. And in doing so, essentially, the Russian Mafia was laundering money through Donald Trump's real estate. That was according to the New York State Attorney General. And this was the first, so far as I can tell, time that happened. But it went on to happen again and again and again. And in the end, it looks like well over $1 billion of Russian Mafia money was laundered through Donald Trump or Trump-branded real estate. I found as many as 13 people tied to the Russian Mafia who either lived in Trump Tower or owned condos there. And when you think about it, I mean, one thing that's really important to understand about the Russian Mafia is it's very unlike the mafia we know in the United States, the Italian-American mafia, which, if you saw The Godfather, was always at war with the FBI.
The Sopranos, yeah.
Right. It's very different than that. The Russian Mafia effectively was an arm of the KGB, of Russian intelligence. And when you put that all together, just think about it for a moment. These are intelligence operatives for Russia, and they are laundering money and living in the building, 721 Fifth Avenue, Trump Tower, the building that was the crown jewel of Donald Trump's empire and where he lived it was his principal residence for many years until he relocated down in Mar-a-Lago. So it's an extraordinary security breach to me. And I mean, that's not the only, I mean, there's much more to it than that, but that's what I write about mostly in House of Trump, House of Putin. And I followed that up with a book called American Compromise, which goes more into the KGB.
Right. That's actually my next question. Why don't you give us a snapshot of your findings in American Compromise, how the KGB cultivated Donald Trump, and related tales of sex, greed, power, and treachery?
Exactly. Well, I was able to get a man named, as a source, a man named Yuri Shvets, who had been a major in the KGB in the 1980s. He was located in Washington Station, working for the KGB. His cover was that he was a journalist working for TASS, the Soviet news agency, but he was really there to cultivate American spies and woo them over to the Soviet Union. And while he was doing that, his colleagues in New York Station, were cultivating Donald Trump. And this goes back even further than the David Bogadin incident. This goes back to 1980. And it started out when Trump had his very, very first great success, the Hyatt Grand Hotel that he developed near Grand Central Station. And like every hotel, it needed television sets in every room and hundreds of rooms. And you might think that a Hyatt, which is really a brand name, blue chip name in the world of hotel franchising, you might think they'd get their TVs from, I don't know, Samsung or Sony or a major vendor like that. But no, they got it from a place called Joy Ludd Electronics. And Joy Ludd Electronics was run by a guy named Semyon Kislin. His partner was Tamir Sapir, and those two men had direct ties to the KGB. And this appears to be the the beginning of it. And gradually they began to woo Trump. And in 1987, it was the KGB itself that organized Donald Trump's first trip to the Soviet Union.
Wow. And you have said that, to quote you, that you are absolutely certain that the U.S. president is a Russian asset. Do you think his actions in the White House support that allegation?
Absolutely. And first, I want to draw a distinction between being an intelligence asset and an intelligence agent. And an agent is always knowing. He or she is an employee of an intelligence agency. You get regular paychecks, and you can be tasked with specific operations. An asset is a much looser relationship, and there are many different kinds of assets. But essentially, it really means a very trusted contact. And in Trump's case, he was trusted because he got literally billions of dollars through Russian mafia and the Russian intelligence operatives, and they were laundering money through his casinos, through his properties, all over the world, really. And there were sort of complex franchising operations. I mean, there are Trump towers. I don't know how many, but there are dozens of them all over the world. And Donald Trump really doesn't build them so much as he lends out his name and gets money for that. But to your question, I mean, what is he doing today? A lot. I mean, for one thing, he's really has not supported Ukraine at all in the Russian its war with Russia. And I mean, I think probably everyone in the country saw him, was it a year ago, the year before, when Vladimir Zelensky went to the White House, and Trump sort of humiliated him, saying, "You don't have the cards. You don't have the cards."
Yeah. And in the same line of thinking, there have been plenty of allegations, and including some by Trump himself, that several U.S. elections have been manipulated. And do you believe that Russia interfered in the 2016 election?
There's absolutely no question about it. And I mean, if you read, one of the most compelling documents on this is the United States Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation, which, by the way, it was a bipartisan investigation, and Marco Rubio at the time was the acting chair of that committee. And if you read that and parts of the Mueller investigation, there's no question that Trump had an enormous number of contacts. One of the most outrageous was, his campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was very much an operative for Vladimir Putin. And before he came into the Trump campaign as campaign manager, he had been in Ukraine as campaign manager for President Yanukovych, and he sort of helped install Yanukovych, who was really a proxy for Putin, as president of Ukraine until he was ousted during the Euromaidan protest in 2014. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. Manafort, I mean, this is in the Senate report. Manafort gave inside information from internal polling numbers of Trump's operation, and he handed it to his associate, who was in the GRU, that's Russian military and intelligence, and they met at a cigar bar in Manhattan and called the Havana Room, and Trump gave it to his associate, and therefore the Russians had that information. And before long, they started. They have all these bots. They had the Internet Research Agency in Russia was effectively a farm for trolls to use the internet to sabotage our communications on behalf of Trump.
Interesting. I'm actually glad that you brought up that Senate hearing and the fact that it was bipartisan, because you have alleged that the Republican Party has repeatedly breached norms, violated the law, lied again, and ultimately began a full-scale assault on American democracy. Are you being partisan here?
It's not a question of being partisan. I mean, of course, I'm against Trump being reelected, or but he's just eviscerating the Constitution. I mean, he really has, and there's this is the United States has been officially declared that it's no longer a liberal democracy. If you look at various NGOs that rate how democratic countries are, we're no longer at the top of the list. We've fallen to, I believe it was number 51 in the rankings. So this is a real problem, and I think as we approach the midterms, it's becoming a critical question as to whether or not we can continue to have fair elections in this country.
Right. Do you think that Russia will try to interfere with the midterms?
Well, I think they always do. I mean, this hasn't been, if you just look at X, what was formerly Twitter, it has taken an enormously sharp turn to the right. And this happened before the 2024 elections. But I see it as effectively a $44 billion campaign contribution by Elon Musk. I mean, I still have a decent following on Twitter of 50,000 or so. But before Musk took it over, if I tweeted a reasonably clever tweet, 500,000 or 1 million people might see it. Right. Now I'm lucky to get a couple of thousand. And X has algorithms that suppress the reach of people who've been critical of Trump, and it's sort of built into the system. And that's one way of manipulating elections, is to manipulate the information available to voters.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I completely agree. Algorithms have really gotten completely out of hand on social media, and I guess that leads to my next question, which is sort of a pivot into talking about journalism, because you're a veteran investigative journalist, and I think it would be remiss not to ask you this question. What do you think is the single biggest blind spot that modern young journalists have right now when covering major global conflicts or domestic political crises? What are we missing when we're staring at the 24-hour news cycle?
Right. Well, I write about this in a post I just put up on my Substack this morning. So I try to address exactly that question. And
perfect.
And obviously I've been around for I've been a journalist for more than 50 years. And when I started out, and really what hooked me on journalism was that you could change the course of history. I remember when Seymour Hersh wrote about the My Lai massacre, and suddenly our heroic American soldiers we see were committing atrocities that the Nazis might have done. I remember Watergate. I remember the Pentagon Papers. Those stories, which were just done by one or two journalists each, really shook the country And not only that, they changed the course of history. And today it seems like that is almost impossible to do. And Trump is an adjudicated racist, but so what? He won't turn over the Epstein politics files. People shrug. He's a Russian intelligence asset, so no one responds. And what's happened, I think, a lot is that no one knows what to believe. And I trace this to a Russian named Vladislav Surkov, who was known as the Gray Cardinal of the Kremlin. He was a very powerful Putin advisor, and he changed what we think of as propaganda radically and adapted it to the world of social media. And instead of just repeating one lie over and over again, he is promoting multiple conflicting realities. And you see it on X or any of the big social media platforms. So many contradictory stories that frankly, it's very hard to know what to believe. It's hard to know what the immediate source is. And I think people's heads are spinning, and what it has resulted in a Congress that can't act anymore, that's paralyzed. We now have a very corrupt Supreme Court. So when there is an explosive revelation by good reporting, and that happens an awful lot. The Congress can't really act on it, and that's what's happened. And I think it's very, very depressing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Between social media and the 24-hour news cycle, the echo chambers are just getting out of hand. Do you think that is why there is such cynicism towards news, if there is cynicism towards news in the first place?
Well, there is, and that's one reason, and it's been a policy of Trump's. I mean, how many times have you heard him say fake news, fake news, fake news? Just something that is real, and I think it's been very frustrating for me. I've had books that are international bestsellers and they sell a lot, but I'm never able to penetrate to the other side. I would love it, if someone could cite a single factual error in either of my books and start a debate with me, but that never happens. Instead, they try to marginalize you. And, I would never be asked on Fox News or any of those, or even the right-wing podcasters. So it's very hard to have a debate of ideas. It's really just they're seizing control by fiat.
Right. Well, to that note, I want to go back to some advice that you can give to junior journalists, because all of that is sort of, at least in my opinion, weighing on junior journalists today, that there is no space for that debate. No one wants to engage in bipartisan conversation. So when you were starting out as a journalist, were you ever paralyzed by that? Just the sheer scale of corruption and lack of conversation that you noticed in the space?
Well, the level of corruption, I think, has grown 100,000-fold. I mean, Trump has made $2 billion last year. His entire family made another $5 billion or so. The you have the Qatar for the bribe jet is what it is.
Or the subscription to Truth Social that just came out.
Unbelievable. I mean, the level of that corruption, $100,000 to monetize insider trading. I mean, the corruption, the scale it's just breathtaking. And it's really very much out in the open. I mean, that's one of Trump's tactics is if he does it in the open, well, it can't be illegal, right? I mean, in his first term, I'm sure everyone remembers, he said, Russia, if you've hacked those Hillary's files, release them right now. And they did.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
that's like admitting to treason. But it can't be illegal because he said it in public. But for young journalists, I mean, it's one. There are two rules of thumb I learned very early on that I would like to stick by. Um, One is I remember it's the dangers of access journalism. I remember early on when I was in my early 20s getting very excited when I lived in Washington and I was invited to have a dinner with a couple of senators, and I was young and impressionable. So I thought that was wonderful. And my mentor back then was the legendary radical journalist I.F. Stone. And I told him I was going to have dinner with these senators. He said, "No, you're not. Start doing that, and you're going to be carrying water for them for the rest of your lives." And access comes with a price. And you can see the journalists who Trump favors today. And essentially, they're media whores. I mean, there was used to be a wonderful site called Media Whores Online. I think it's gone now, but it would itemize every case, and now people bending their knee to get access to the president or whomever. And we see it now, and it's been horrifying watching what CBS News is going through. I mean, for more than 50 years, I think CBS 60 Minutes was the greatest investigative program on national TV ever.
Right.
And now it's been destroyed. And you see that happening a lot. So that's partly the perils of investigative journalism. The other is both sidesism. And that is, you're supposed to be fair. You're supposed to give both sides. But, if one side says 2 and 2 is 4 and the other says it's 123, the truth is not somewhere in between. And I think a journalist's first priority should be giving the truth, getting to the truth. And that story would be, well, whoever thinks it's 123 is out of his or her mind, and that's the story.
Right. Yeah. I've noticed on social media, since I'm young and that's the place that I frequent the most, that both sidesism is believed to be the catch-all cure for echo chambers, but you're saying it's really just the pursuit of truth.
Right.
That should be.
Right. And you know what? I want to ask you a question. One of the great problems, I think, you talk about echo chambers. It's also, I think we're all in our individual silos. And I do have people who follow me, and maybe we're one silo. And then there are millions of silos, but they're impenetrable. And, it's one of the great problems, I think, created by social media, because it used to be Americans shared the same basic sense of facts, the same reality, and now we don't. And there are people in their MAGA silos that I can never reach. And I don't know these people, but is it impossible to have rational discourse with them? Why can't we do that? And I think maybe it takes someone who's better in social media than I am to help penetrate those other silos.
Yeah, definitely, because I think social media is increasingly becoming the platform that everyone goes to for their news. Okay, final question, I promise. What do you hope to achieve with these books that you've written? They're all New York Times bestsellers. They've certainly reached audiences, but as you said, it's very hard to penetrate into that debate space. So what do you hope to achieve?
Well, I would like them to have real political impact. And I think the discrepancy from what I'm going through now and what happened when I started out was, Woodward and Bernstein's Watergate, it wasn't just their writing, but it provoked enough so there were Senate investigations. And those Senate investigations led to something. And partly what happened back then was the Republicans were not MAGA zombies.
Mm.
And they actually listened, and some crossed the aisle. And in the end, a coalition of Republicans led by Senator Barry Goldwater went to the White House and met with Nixon and said, listen, you've got to resign or you will be impeached and convicted. And we don't have that today. That's the big discrepancy. And I've been enormously frustrated by that for years and years, and it's gotten worse and worse. I think thanks to social media, thanks to the Russians, and thanks to the Republicans. I mean, it's interesting when you do see occasional Republicans who've switched and joined things like the Bulwark or the Liberty Project. And but I wish there were a hell of a lot more of them.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for interviewing with me. This was amazing. And I'm definitely going to take your advice to heart. Any closing comments from you?
Though I don't have any at all. We have to keep fighting for this, and it's a very, very tough battle.
Yes, I agree. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.